when it comes to novels, you've got your plots, you've got your characterizations, and that's what people are going to sell your novel in. The way that you keep them in the novel, the way that you keep them reading, is making sure that they're invested by giving them the convincing details for both the character, the setting, and the various struts of your world building, so to speak. And you have to be convincing there. You have to give them things to hang on to. And just as all writers are at the heart of it, we're all entertainers. We have to keep them engaged. We have to keep them excited, interested, and they're with us. And anchoring people with details is just the best way to do that, in my experience.
What is up, everybody? You're listening to episode 127 of SFF Addicts. I'm your host, Adrian M. Gibson, and welcome to your weekly dive into the world of science fiction, fantasy, and writing craft. Joining me again this week is my guest co-host, my bestie from the Midwestie, the queen of my days, Greta Kelly. How you doing, Greta?
Hi, I'm good. I'm bestie from the Midwestie. That's adorable. It's going to go on my email signature from now on.
When we were in Glasgow, people were just like serious brother-sister vibes.
Yeah.
So I was contemplating like sister from another mister. I don't know. But
I'm like, you're my bookish bro.
Aw, appreciate that. Well, speaking of my bookish sister, go get The Queen of Days, which is Greta's latest novel. If you want heists, there it is right there. If you want heists and a found family of thieves kicking ass and kicking God's asses, then The Queen of Days is for you.
Yeah.
Specifically God's asses. And it's out now in paperback. So you got audiobook, paperback, hardcover, take your pick.
Yep. And if you all are looking for any fungal noir to spice up your mystery thriller reading lists with a bunch of really awesome speculative elements, it's just chef's kiss. Amazing. Go check out Mushroom Blues.
There's no spice in it, though. So just
I mean, you have to save something for book 2, right?
Of course. Oh, yeah. Just definitely going to ship Cody and Henrietta. As well, a quick note for everyone out there listening or watching, the SFF Addicts Patreon and merch store are live, so check the links in the description to support what we do here. Also, don't forget to rate and review the podcast on your favorite podcast app and subscribe to the FanFiAddict YouTube channel where this and every other episode of the show is available in full video. And now joining us once again is the lovely Nghi Vo, award-winning author of Siren Queen, The Chosen and the Beautiful, The Singing Hills Cycle, and the newly released The City in Glass. Go pick it up. Welcome back, Nghi. How's it going?
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Absolute pleasure. So this is part 2 of our 2-part chat with Nghi, so I recommend checking out part 1 to get to know her better. Today, though, we're digging into the nitty-gritty as we talk about convincing details and descriptions. And I'm very, very thankful that you brought up this topic because I've been wanting, since MJ and I started, we've been wanting to do description as a thing because I feel like it's tricky business, but we're gonna try to figure it out today. So to kick this off, how do you view details, descriptions in the context of a story in terms of like the purpose that they serve, and sort of like why is it so important for them to be convincing enough to draw a reader deeper into a story?
Okay, so when it comes to novels, you've got your plots, you've got your characterizations, and that's what people are going to sell your novel in. The way that you keep them in the novel, the way that you keep them reading, is making sure that they're invested by giving them the convincing details for both the character, the setting, and the various struts of your world building, so to speak. And you have to be convincing there. You have to give them things to hang on to. And just as all writers are at the heart of it, we're all entertainers. We have to keep them engaged. We have to keep them excited, interested, and they're with us. And anchoring people with details is just the best way to do that, in my experience.
I think anchoring is a really good word for that.
That is, yeah, that's a good way to sum it up. Do you have any examples of like books or stories that really stuck with you because their details were just so evocative?
Okay, we're working in sort of a golden age of writers right now, as far as I'm concerned. We're getting to get so specific. We're getting to get so wild in terms of how strange and wonderful and weird our books get. We get to have mushrooms. We get to have heists. We get to have whatever we want. And one of the first times I think I ever really noticed details really working to bring me into a story was actually when I was a little kid. And once again, I was at a garage sale. A lot of my stories start with, and then I was at a garage sale and I touched this thing that I shouldn't have touched. And in yet another random box of books that no one wanted anymore, I found a copy of Jean Auel's Clan of the Cave Bear. And I think I was about 8 or 9 or so. And I'm like, oh, it's about bears. It's not about bears. It's a little bit about bears. It is about Paleolithic civilizations and a Cro-Magnon girl who's adopted by Neanderthals. It's very bloody. It's very sexual. It's very grim. And I mean, I was like a little kid, and I had a doll, and I'm like, now we sacrifice to the great bear god and have hallucinogenic experiences with it.
This sounds like my kind of book. Fuck
It was great. It's a classic for a reason. I think the series actually finished up about a decade ago. And the thing about it was huge. You know, I was a bookish little kid, and I was like, okay, that's more bang for the buck. That's more pages I can read for a quarter. And the book is so much exposition, and if you continue reading the book, which is well over 800 pages or so, I think, in paperback, if you're there for it all, you have to be there for the details and the descriptions of resetting a bone, making a pouch out of an otter's skin, all the flint napping. The flint napping never stops. And the thing is, I was there for that. So from a young age, I was pretty convinced they're going to be here with me. If it's interesting enough, it probably helps if they're like neurodivergent little preteens, maybe, I don't know. But if you give them interesting things, they will stay. It won't matter if it doesn't like necessarily fit into the structure. It doesn't matter if it's the most lean and stripped down story you can tell. And they will be there for it. And that's what that book taught me, as well as a lot of flint napping. I actually tried it on the playground once.
I wish we had gone to the same school.
Yeah. You got Red Dragon. Your parents are like, what the fuck are we finding for Nghi at these garage sales?
No, see, here's the whole thing. The best reading experience, I'm convinced, is being a child with whom you don't really share like an actual language with your parents, because I was reading in English, and my parents have excellent English, but they weren't reading the same thing. So they're like, "What's she doing? It doesn't matter. She's quiet. It's fine."
Why is she sacrificing her doll?
Look, the Barbie was selected by lot. I don't know what to explain to you.
Right. The other one survived. This is just the will of the gods. What do you want from me?
The village survived. You cannot deny.
The harvest was good. The sturgeon
you got
again.
results.
That just reminded, like, you talking about that book and like the descriptions and details and everything reminded me so much of my love and the reason I fell in love with the Redwall series by Brian Jacques.
Yes.
Oh my god, like I could just reread over and over the descriptions of the feasts that these little animals are having. Be like, y'all sound like you're having a great time. Like, why am I not eating like this?
Or just like the Turkish delight from Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Oh yes,
like,
yes.
Someday I will try, and then you try it, and it's like, oh no.
Oh wait, have you ever made it yourself? It's different if you make it yourself.
Okay, I'll try that.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's really not that hard to make it yourself either.
No. Okay, it's a little sticky, but it's not hard.
Yeah. It's like, I'm not going to say anything about that sentence. It's a little sticky. But
anyway, I have a great time in the Midwest. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Fucking Turkish delight for days. Midwest delight. More broadly, how have you approached details and descriptions in your own stories? So like once you started getting into writing and based on the stuff that you'd read growing up, how you started to look at the ways in which you infused details into your own stories.
Okay. It does happen. Well, here's this thing. One thing that I'm trying to get away from is writing to word count. And if you have to hit 1,000 words every day, suddenly it becomes very, very tempting to go off on a tangent about how if tiger salamanders don't get enough to eat as neophytes, they will turn into cannibals. They will physiologically turn into cannibals. It's a real thing. But apart from like padding out your word count, which I've always needed a lot of help with, part of it is the fact that I think that's the way our brains work. We hit an idea and you start thinking, I want to know more about that. And if I want to know more about it, there's a good chance that someone else is going to want to know more about it. And here's the thing, even if they don't, if I explain it attractively enough, if I weld it as unnoticeably as I can into the text, they'll be along for the ride and I will have finished word count for the day.
I like that.
Yeah,
You're
I
so
like that too.
practical. God
Yeah.
damn.
I used to write I used to get paid per word. I have to be.
That's true. That's true. And you're all
So,
right. And you were
yeah,
already as a copy editor writing about really strange shit.
random.
So it's like you were just like basking in the details in your
Oh,
day
yeah.
job.
Yeah, at one point I got the assignment to write an article called How Ride Bear, and that was a good day.
How ride bear?
How ride bear? You can't. You don't. You just don't. There's no reason to. There's no reason to try it. Don't do it.
Just like
Abort!
get your bear
Abort!
saddle and, and mount the bear.
And say mush.
This is going to go real well for I'll watch from behind the wall as you try that. That sounds
Yeah,
brilliant.
please, like no listeners try to attempt to ride a bear.
That was in
I
fact
really
the
hope
gist
not.
of the article. Do not do that thing.
Do not do it.
So it sounds
Oh,
like
God.
your like ability to add all these details and descriptions, is it something that more happens like as you're writing, or are you thinking about it even before then during world building and plotting and things like that? I'm assuming, are you someone who plots beforehand, or do you just go in and write from the seat of your pants, as they say?
I think we touched on this a little bit in last week's show, but the idea is I have too many deadlines now to be as much of a pantser as I used to be. I can't just open up a document and just start writing and see where it takes me. I at least have to know where I'm going because that deadline is a real thing, and so is the rent that I need to pay. Um, but what it comes down to is the details are just a part of being alive. It's a part of being a person. It's a part of, you're walking down the street and suddenly you're like, I wonder what's up with that tree. Or even better, I wonder what's wrong with that tree. And that's how I learned about this certain kind of boring gall insect that just destroys trees in my area. And I'm like, turns out the tree in front of my place is very, very invasive. Um, it's bad for everything. It shouldn't be there. But I mean, but that's life. That's details. And the thing is, here's this thing that's on the side of all writers. Everyone, we're all like little trivia fiends. We love knowing like random things about the houses around us or the trees or animals or strange things about hair or the things that live on our eyelashes. We love knowing about that stuff because then we get to share it with people. And part of me putting it into my books is sharing it with other people. And I have absolutely written short stories just based on random facts I have found, like mammoths, for example, in all of the Singing Hills novellas. A lot of that came from my idea of reading about this one farm, I think out in Siberia, that was doing these experiments to try to domesticate foxes. And they found out that a few generations on, very, very quickly, if you domesticate something, they start to become more vocal, they start to wag their tails, and they start to get white splotches. Like no matter what the mammalian species, those are signs of domestication.
And it also changes like their very morphology, where it's like the
Yes.
shape of their faces, the shape of their very like
Yeah, they become more
bodies.
like infantile.
It changes.
Almost.
Yes, they
Yeah,
become more
Yeah.
monotonous. Yes,
Yep.
yes, it's very cool. And I'm like, what happens if I do that for mammoths? And then I got a mammoth with like white socks and white spots. And I'm like, yes, we need to come up with something to use this in. So I mean, it's including convincing details in your books is one of the best ways to invite people in to say, "Oh my God, did you know this?"
And I think the magic of writing is that there are so many different stages that you can implement this stuff. Like I spent a long time world building before I wrote Mushroom Blues, but I scrapped the book that I wrote before Mushroom Blues, but I was like, the world is just too good. I'm going to keep that. Um, and it like laid a really, really strong foundation. But at the same time, it's like you go through first draft. There's stuff that you incorporate into the first draft. And then there's so many like cool little details that you can infuse in the revision process as well. Like there's no point in which you are forced to be like, no more details. Like you can't do any more. Like this description can't be enhanced or changed around or anything like that. Like it's a constant thing that you can tackle when the moment feels right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I have this. I've heard this theory that American writing is very influenced by Hemingway. Very, very stripped down narratives. Very,
Iceberg kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I have enormous amount of respect for a guy who can tell a story in 6 words, but we have to have more space. There has to be an opposing facet to that as well. Like one of the projects I think that actually did make me the writer that I am is for about like 300 days, I wrote like 100-word story every day. And that was a really fun, interesting exercise. Most of them were crap. It's okay. They were just terrible. But the thing is I did them and I finished them and I got a really good point of view into what you can fit into 100 words and what you have to leave out. And now that I've done that, I'm like, I don't live like that anymore. I can do other things. Here, do you want to understand, do you want to understand how much slime a hagfish can produce? It's a lot. It's so much.
I'm not in the prison of description anymore.
I'm so free. Do you know what happens when you dump a ton of hagfish onto a Prius? Bad things.
Or
Does it
glorious things.
does their slime like corrode the metal or something like that?
No, it doesn't. But did you guys hear about that poor Prius? I'm not joking. That's a real thing.
Oh no.
No, this is somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. Like there was a truck that was full of hagfish. There was an accident, and they dumped their whole load off on the Prius that was driving behind them. And the thing about hagfish is that when they get scared, they produce an enormous amount of slime because if something grabs them, they want to get away. So they just slimed this single Prius, and it was a very bad day for that Prius driver.
I'm looking at the picture right now. And
There
it
you
is
go.
fucking wonderful. I'm going to like superimpose it on this episode.
Are you having a day that's this bad?
Oh my
No, you're
God.
not.
No, it
I'm just
literally
imagining
looks
something from
like
Ghostbusters.
imagine a toddler sneezing a giant booger. And
Onto a
imagine
Prius.
there was a car inside of that booger. It's beautiful.
No,
That is
it's
masterful.
nature is beautiful, and that Prius learned it firsthand.
Very much so.
Oh man. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, let's moving on from that mental image
Moving
that
on
I
from the
cannot.
I've never moved on from that image. I don't know about you, but now I bet you can't either.
I'm going to
I'm
flee
back
from
to
that mental
tab.
image.
I'm going back to that tab like regularly now.
I'd love to get your advice on like the delivery of descriptions, because I think this is something that authors kind of get stuck in the weeds with, or where we read these books. Like I feel like The Two Towers is the classic example of 100 pages of running. Like, can we not? So like is your like best advice that you can give people for how to deliver really good descriptions and details as they're writing or as they're editing? Like when do they know, when do you know as a writer, like this is something I'm going to deliver through exposition or dialogue or this way or that way? Like just any advice you could impart?
Oh, sure. So the first draft, it all goes in. That's mostly what I'm worried about word count. So of course it all goes in on the first draft, but the first draft is accountable to no one but yourself. If it sounds cool, throw it in. If you love it, throw it in. If you need to spend like 20 minutes figuring out how civil primogeniture works in your book, throw it in. It's like all the world building can go in then. And the thing is, editing is magic. If it doesn't fit, you can always take it out and use it for something else. And it's a little trite to say, but I genuinely believe there's no such thing as wasted words. They'll be handy again, or even if it's just the thing that you learned from writing it. Every time you write, you learn new things about how to write. And I mean, for me personally, I've always thought that, I never actually learned to write. I just learned how to write the book I'm writing. And then I'm like, when I finish it, I'm like, wait, I'm done. And I'm like, this information is completely useless for the next thing I'm going to write. It's fine. I'll go ahead and do it. But the thing to remember is that the audience is on your side. If they have picked up your book, they're at least nominally here for the ride that you're on. And if the ride that you're on wants to talk about, how mushrooms propagate or what a mycelium mat really does, they're here for that. They picked it up, they're with you, and they're on your side. And all you have to do is keep them there. And they're curious just like you are. They want to have a good time just like you do. And once you have that confidence, and that actually does take a little bit to build, because if you grew up with the idea that, hey, maybe no one wants my writing or no one wants my story, that's difficult. That's a difficult block to get across. But if you get over it and you realize that we're all on the same side, we're here to experience a story together, me as the teller, them as the reader or listener. And you just start throwing in things that feel right. You start feeling in like where you think, this needs some exposition. You can throw it in and you can make it as obvious as you want. You don't have to hide it. Sometimes there's this really cool trick you can do where you can teach people things about your world or about their world, and they don't notice, but I'm actually far too blunt for that. I'm like, here, have a drop of story. I don't care if you can tell that I needed to make word count and I was really hungry when I did it. It's okay. It's like, so far people have been very patient with me and they're having a good time is what I'm told.
Yeah, I think you strike a good balance there for sure. And
Mhm.
I will toss out this trick to anyone about the wasted words thing. I have a specific document, just like a Microsoft Word document, where if I cut large chunks, I just copy and paste it there. So it's like regardless of like the project that it applies to, I can go back there and be like, that was a really fucking cool way of phrasing like such and such thing. Or like that actually applies really well to the the scene that I'm writing or some aspect of this particular story. It's like never delete your words entirely. It's like you can just toss them into like just a big old pile of it's like a box of misfit toys. You could just you could just go back to it and pluck out the ones that work for future projects. And
Oh, I love that. That's
yeah,
great.
yeah,
I
it
mean, the
really helps
classic
in
advice
that
is
sense.
advice for a reason, right?
Yeah, but go create your misfit paragraph or sentence folder or document or whatever.
And you never know when a certain bit is going to turn into something like a short story
Yeah, yeah.
because I mean, one of the best things about short stories is for me short stories are very much stunt writing. So you don't have to carry it for a novel. You just have to carry it for, between about 1,000 to 7,000 words. And that is a great place to explore the stuff that you did toss. And it's not like they're worse ideas or that short stories are worse. It's just that this is the right setting for it rather than a novel.
Yeah, because you can like extrapolate it up to a certain point, and it's like
Mm.
that's all it needed, as opposed to
Mhm.
like, well, fuck, I gotta carry this for like tens and tens of thousands of words. I want to dig into exposition a little bit more,
Mm.
because I like the what you were mentioning before about like the bluntness of your delivery, and every author like they're gonna find the balance that works for them, the ways in which they convey exposition, the ways in which they infuse description or whatever through dialogue or um, character action and that kind of thing. But when you're conveying details through exposition in particular, how do you ensure that you can deliver it in such a way that it's convincing for the reader and doesn't break the immersion for them?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know if I've ever thought about the immersion of my reader, and I know that someone out there is going, "We know," uh, but but like I said, it's mostly what just seems interesting today. Like, here's a question I get asked sometimes when I'm doing the Singing Hills, which is the travels of a storytelling cleric and their bird-shaped memory spirit. They wander the world, they listen to stories. They're kind of like their world's version of an anthropologist. And people have asked me, people don't really tell stories like that. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Of course they do. I'm on public transportation. Every day I don't hear a story about Jesus is a good day for me. But I mean, but here's the thing. We're all storytellers. It's the way humans work. Like I once heard that, rather than being Homo sapien, we would probably be just as well being called Homo narrans, the storytelling man. And what it comes down to is that there are some stories that start with once upon a time. And that's a fun cue. Once upon a time, you're sitting down, you're hearing a story, you have expectations about the story that you want to hear. Um, now a story that's now a story that starts no shit, there I was. That's a different storytelling experience. And no one is going to tell you that you're not going to be a party and have someone say that to you. Or the story that when your aunt's like a little drunk and she's come here, you're old enough to hear this now. And you're like, oh shit, because that's a story that's coming for you. It really
Right.
is. And
And that's a story that you want to hear too.
Yeah.
you want to hear it and you don't want to hear it, and I think someone's going to be dead at the end or something, or there's like a mistaken identities or stolen family jewels, and do you know you're a princess? It's all of that, and once you figure out the fact that we're always telling stories and we're always learning stories and we're always picking up random bits of information, um, it's no different than just sort of wandering the world and living your life. We're always hearing stories. And you just have to figure out in this setting, why is the story being told? even if the story is as simple as don't touch that you tell to like a little kid, for example, and they say why, and they're like, I have got to come up with something that is both fast and succinct that will convince this child not to burn their little fingers off.
This is like
Please don't
every
stick
day in
that
my
fork
life.
into that socket. Yeah.
I got to spend some time with a little kid last week, and I was like, okay, I see this is more than Pat the Bunny. I see this as please, do you not understand that golf carts are your natural enemy? You're not tall enough to be seen over the hood. You know that, right? No, she doesn't.
Oh man, it's so true though. Like they'll always ask you the most random questions, like at 2 a.m. as well. So like my kid is like, "Mama, where's heaven?" And I'm like, well, she's seen Lion King in the sky.
Greta, but that's just their tactic for delaying, like going back to sleep.
It truly is. Yeah. But now she thinks that heaven is on Saturn.
Yeah. Your daughter's asking some real existential shit.
Yeah.
My son's just like, do all bugs have wings? And I was just like, all right, let's go, buddy.
I feel like 8 or 9 is about the age when they start to get like really existential. Like they start realizing that, hey, we're mostly all gonna die, or that's that moment where they're like, I'm like, oh my god, you've realized your own mortality.
It happens way earlier than you think.
Yeah, really my kids are Lorelai's 4, and she wanted to know all the information.
Yeah. It's like we found a dead baby bird in the backyard the other day. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, all right, like my son found it. I'm like, please don't touch that. But like,
time to talk about death, child.
You're going to get this. There is never a wrong, like according to children, there's never a wrong time to hear a story, is there?
No.
There is never a moment where you can say, hey, do you want to hear a story? And they're going to, at this age at least, they're not going to say no. And I feel like that's kind of like, that's the instinct. That is our instinct. We want to hear stories. We want to hear more.
And when we get older, it's kind of like, I like what you were saying about the expectations that you get from the beginning of a story, kind of setting up what you are in for. Maybe that's like, as we get older as adults, we need something like that in order to activate this thing that was inherent when we were children.
Ooh.
And the expectation that we get from the beginning of a book, not only creating expectations of story structure and beats and genre and that kind of stuff, but I think even description and it's like the beginning of a story can tell you so much about the ways in which this story is going to be told, its exposition, if it has more lush prose versus more sparse prose and that kind of stuff can tell you a lot about that author and about the story that you're going to get.
It's like saying, what am I here to do? And, when you start dropping exposition in your books, it's, I'm here to delight you sometimes, or I'm here to horrify you. That's it. Maybe that's the key of it. You can drop in exposition whenever you want to, and as explicitly as you want to. As a writer for yourself, you just have to know, why am I dropping this in? Is it going to delight someone? Is it going to make them afraid? Is it going to make them excited? It has to serve a purpose. But once you know what purpose it is, and as long as it serves that purpose, you can do whatever you want. I mean, I know we were joking about Victor Hugo, I think last time, and he's like, why do we need to know about the sewers? I'm like, mostly so I can joke about it in 2024.
I mean, he had a lot of forethought, so.
I think he was also paid by the word, wasn't he? He's
probably.
A lot of authors
Charles Dickens definitely was.
Yeah.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm being haunted by this story that you told that you wrote 100 or like how many 100-word stories a day for how many days? That sounds insane to me. But as someone who has so much like history in doing short form fiction, like how has that informed the way you approach detail and description in your own works? And does it change depending on when you're working on more like a novella versus a novel length project? Or for you, is it just the same?
There's this funny trick you can do when you're writing that short. If you're writing short, people tend to forgive you a lot of implication. Like I can imply 100 years have passed and they'll just go with me on that one. Look, writing is very much a collaborative. It's a collaborative process. It's writer and it's reader, and it's the poor editor and agent who are stuck in between. Sorry, Sanaa and Diana.
Are you? You don't seem sorry.
I don't actually. As my agent
there's
said,
like a hint of maliciousness there.
Like, you don't sound sorry, and I'm like, this is Midwest sorry. I'm not.
But it's yeah, no instead of no, yeah.
You listen to the last
Greta
one. Just listen to the last one. But we're here to talk with the people. We're here to have an experience with the people who are reading our books. And what it comes down to in many cases is that if you meet certain expectations, if a reader can come to me and realize, okay, this writer is going to treat me with respect, this writer is going to tell me a whole story, this writer is invested in me having a good time, suddenly a lot is forgivable that they tell you is not forgivable in classes. I mean, there's that whole thing about, you have to know what the rules are before you break them. That's certainly true. But some of them, something that we need to understand, especially as artists, especially as creatives, is that every rule can be broken. Every standard can be broken down into something else. As long as we do it in an interesting way, we will be forgiven. We can do whatever we want as long as we make it interesting, as long as we keep their attention for another page or another 20 pages or another 4 books or however long your career gets to last. Um, and one of the things I really, really do love about this conversation is that well, I'm a writer. I spend all my time behind my computer, talking to absolutely no one but my cat. This is how I make friends. I'm like, here, would you like a fun fact about how many alchemists were running around trying to make gold? It was way too many. Or did you know that flour, if you throw it up, actually is very, very flammable, and that's why a lot of bakeries kind of went up in smoke during the 1700s. It's how I make friends. It's how we have a good time.
I'm gonna steer clear of my sons anytime they throw up flour.
It really is very, very shockingly flammable. It's very bad.
Crazy. All right. Well, I mean, good thing bakeries are full of fucking ovens.
Yeah. It's like, look, I don't know what to tell you. I want that Danish and I want it now. It's fine. Please die for my sweet treats.
Die for my sweet treats. That's why they can just change their name to Sweets to Die For.
There you go.
And they're
There
all
you go.
set. They're all set. I want to use City and Glass as a bit of a case study. We talked about it quite a bit last episode, but you did a really, really good job of delivering details, both small and large, throughout that book. So I wanted to ask you how you decided to sort of pick the details to focus on and which to leave more to the reader's imagination, because you did say, like, it is a relationship, the writer and the reader. So there are things that you can elaborate upon, there are other things that you can allude to, and it's really easy for a reader to kind of just like become immersed without realizing, like, that's a surface detail versus this one's a flammable flower or some shit like that, like really hyper detailed. So how do you pick and choose which ones are the right details to dig into more?
Here is where being a writer, time doesn't mean anything to us unless we've got an appointment or kids to pick up or something like that. Time means nothing to us because as writers, time goes any way we want as we write the book. The reader experiences the book from beginning to end. And I experience the book as a first draft, and then editing, I go back to the middle, I go back to the beginning, I remove things, I expand upon things. And that's our big advantage. This is why I'm a huge fan of, before you edit a damn thing, just write the whole thing. Just write it, just get everything on the page, and then you can go back and cut, or you can expand, or you can lever it open. There were a few times, like the first draft of this book came out at about 42,000 words. The final draft is almost 10,000 words more than that. And some of it was because my agent, when she got it, she's like, you've just completely blown past these segments here. And I'm like, is that a problem? And she's like, yes, it is. But she said, the thing that I have on my side is that along the way, I left tons of details and tons of little boxes where if you just hit them with a crowbar, or maybe like those boxes in the old Mario games where you punch them and something comes out, if any one of those details, you just tap it and you can get a story out of it, or I know what the story is behind it. And that's another part of it, which is I get a lot of credit for writing extremely detailed stuff very, very quickly. And it's a trick. It's just a trick. And at the bottom of that trick is plausibility. As long as the audience feels that I can do that with every detail along the way. They will come with me. They will believe me. They will believe me when I say, "Oh, by the way, there's a country where the people marry their brightest young men to living flame." And that's just a thing I drop. I don't have to expand upon it. I can if I want to. I don't know what it is, but if you gave me like about 5 minutes and a few note cards, I will absolutely come up with something for you. But as long as they believe I can do that, I can do whatever I like.
But like, how do you resist the urge? Because I'm like, as someone who chronically overwrites and has to cut massive amounts of words, like, how do
You're
you
like my
know
hero. You're like a
as you're
unicorn.
writing?
How long was Queen of Days before you cut it
Yeah.
down?
Queen of Days was actually the outlier because that was
Okay.
a nano project. So
Oh,
it just started out as being extremely bare bones, and I had to go back and add like a whole point of
Okay.
view. But like the Frozen Crown, when I wrote the first draft of that book, it was like probably pushing 200,000 words. And so I probably cut
that's so
50K
much.
by the time it got published.
That is literally that's like 10 Seeing Hills novellas.
Yeah. So like
Awesome.
obviously I was being heavy-handed with the description. So please tell me the trick. Like how do you know when to just mention these boys that you're marrying to a living flame and when you're not, like when you dive in and like go in with both feet to tell me all the details.
It really helps when I know where I'm going because I'm usually in a hurry to get there. It also helps to know, oh, this is maybe a thing. So we talked before about the fact that I was a copywriter before I went full traditional publish. Before I decided that traditional publishing was absolutely where I was going to make all my cash. Um, and one of the things that copywriting specifically tells you how to do is write to word count. Is it 5,000 words? Is it 500 words? And when you were doing the job that I was doing, you do not give anyone extra words for anything. It's like you will be paying me the 5 cents for the word. So if there's a maximum, you just stop there. So you start to get very good at the pacing. I don't know if it works, but all of the Seeing Hills books are meant to be about between 20,000 and 25,000 words. When it comes to the novels, I tend to be a little bit more sketchy about it, but those are largely intended to be about 70 to 80,000. And if I know that, I gotta hit my beat and be out in 70,000 words, it does actually help me not decide. I'm like, I'm going to explore this world and this specific tiger salamander for a while. So know where your word count is, and assume that you're going to get paid for it, and you're not going to get paid for more. How about that?
All right.
That definitely works. How does that apply to, okay, so if you're thinking about your story in terms of that, like
Mm.
what's my word count and what can I achieve with the limit that I have here? Um how does that make you think about character in terms of how you talk about characters and how you describe them? And this is like something that I've been experiencing more as I became a writer, where I'll read stuff that I used to really love, and then I'm reading it again. And I'm like, you spent way too fucking long describing that character. Like, I didn't need 2/3 of that. And, one of my friends calls it laundry listing, where you just like, and this thing, and she looked like, these are her eyes, and this is her neck, and there are her boobs, and there's her, and it's like you're just basically doing the laundry list of how a character looks.
Just the up down.
The up down, man. Start at the eyes, go to the toes.
And here's me being really flippin' lazy, actually. I almost never talk about what characters look like. Very, very seldom. The key to getting away with this is you start talking about what other characters think they look like. Like, I talked about this a while back, and I think I'm gonna keep this up because this has been a really fun game. I never describe any of my characters as beautiful or handsome. Like, I just don't use those words to describe characters because, I mean, if I describe someone as having an oval face and kind of like, uh, and like very knobby bones on their wrists, the reader gets the idea, and the reader will figure it out for me. It'll be fine. And they will pick it up from how everyone is reacting to that character, and it's a pretty good way to direct your writing as well. Like, if I think this character is beautiful, how are all these characters reacting to them? If they're unattractive, if they have specifically very average looks, or they look like someone they cared about or someone they didn't care about. that work can be, you can just make the reader do that work for you. And it's a lot of fun, actually. But when it comes to getting character detail into a book and making it convincing and doing it all within 75,000 words because no one's paying me for more, one good way to do it is to, and we're back to love again. What does the character love and how do they love it? You can tell so much about someone once you figure that part out about them. And one of the ways to make your audience fall in love with someone is to see someone else loving them or to see them loving something else. That seems to really get us on a human level in terms of how we relate to the world, how the audience relates to our characters. And at the very worst, there's always the what is it? Are you guys familiar with the 4-2-1 character description model?
No, tell me
It
more.
sounds familiar, but yeah,
Oh,
tell us about it.
it's the one where if you have a main character, they get 3 to 4 traits, and that's who they are. If you have like a secondary character or a character who is just a recurring, they get 2, and everyone else who's like your city guards, your bakers, although it's like they don't have their own stories. For the sake of the story, they have 1. And that actually kind of keeps you good and focused off what is someone doing on a page. If they start to push the bounds of that, either your narrative has gotten away from you or you need to write a book about them. So, it's a win-win.
Not half
Well,
a
that's an
fucking
interesting
page
trick.
about
Yeah.
about how someone looks. I'm so salty about it. I'm just
No,
really
but
annoyed.
did you have a good time writing it? Was like,
No,
was
this
it a
is
good time?
yeah, this isn't my book. This is reading someone else's book and being like, that's like way too much character description. But I do think like it does really work to set limits for yourself in terms of not straying too far into territory that maybe you love to describe characters, but I guarantee you there are a lot of readers out there who are just like, I'm going to gloss over this because I don't need
Absolutely.
to know what
everything.
color shoes they're wearing.
And I did really love like not necessarily knowing what Vitrine looked like, because it like every story she told about living among the people of Azrael, it seemed like she looked like something different.
I mean, she was a
Yeah.
shapeshifter, so
Yeah.
it worked perfectly in
So
that
I loved
sense.
that.
Yeah.
But how do you use like details like that to convey external as well as internal journeys that your characters are going on? Because obviously Vitrine was going through a lot of like grief and rage, but like she never released a breath she didn't know she was holding. So like what's your trick there?
If I could have put her in sweatpants, I would have done. I would have given her sweatpants and some ice cream. And I kind of even went into it because I'm actually a huge fan of learning about textile history. And I'm like, okay, do we have elastics at this point? We do not. She cannot be in sweatpants. But that was emotionally, that's kind of where she was for a great deal
she's a
of the
demon
book.
out of time.
She can have sweatpants if she wants, Diana.
She will. Yeah. They can make ice cream. They can figure it out.
Well, I mean, see, this is that wonderful thing, because people absolutely do, release a breath they don't know they're holding. That's a real thing, and I actually kind of dig that explanation. I think it's great. But I mean, when it comes right down to why your characters are doing the thing on the screen and why they need to be convincing, part of it is just the fact that if you have set up the circumstances well enough, the audience will be there with them. If your character has gone through something traumatic, there's a good chance your reader has been through it with them as they read it, and they will be reproducing those things. So, like, I can't remember what it was I was reading, but just when we hit that line, that very famous release a breath they didn't know they were holding, I could actually feel myself doing the same thing. And I'm like, okay, you fucking won that, writer. That was great. And if you can get that kind of simpatico going with the reader, you can write whatever you want. I mean, one thing that I have always told Diane, I think I told her this during like the very first call where we were trying to figure out if we wanted to work together. I said, look, you're never going to get a surprise from me. I'm a deeply predictable writer, but I can promise you that wherever I take you, you'll have a good time. And that's largely worked. I don't think I'm a surprise, but I am a good time. That's also on all of my dating profiles.
I was just gonna say.
Well, surprise isn't the only place to like create tension though either. Sometimes watching the inevitable journey is tense enough.
Sometimes the city is going to fall over. I mean, that's on the cover. The city is being destroyed, and it's not a surprise. It's a horrible, horrible inevitability, and people pick up the book anyway.
Yeah. And when it comes to world, do you think like world details and character details exist in isolation, or do they continually inform each other? as the story goes along?
It's all of peace. It's all like the more history you read, the more you learn like things about why why do our faucets work the way they do, or why do we wear the clothes we wear, or who gets to wear high heels. It's all of a piece. Why do you love the things you do? Because you live in the world that you do. And one of the most difficult things I've learned as a writer is how to make sure that it feels like they're all informing on each other. It's not that you can't have outliers. It's not that you can't have weirdos. We always do. We all know them. We all are them. But you have to be an outlier from something. We as people are reactions to the world around us, and your characters need to be reactions to the world that you have put them in. And as long as it is an honest reaction, and honest reactions are everywhere. There's no such thing as a wrong reaction. There's no such thing as a bad victim, or incorrect uh, or an incorrect stimulus. It's just people. And as long as you're selling that, as long as it's an honest reaction, that's what you need to sort of knit your characters into their world, to make them a part of it, and to make them a part of the world in the same way.
And that honesty, do you think
That's
that's kind
yeah,
of
that's
how you?
interesting. Well, like building on like the
Yeah.
world in general and like immediate setting versus broader world in which the story takes place, how do you decide which details are like the right ones to convey like this is the city of Azrael, but it exists in this whole larger world in a believable way that people will hear those little details and like be curious and want to know more?
My readers are not just like me. I know that. They're interested in different things, but largely if I look at a fact and I go, "Oh, that's really cool," you can convince them that it's really cool too. It's I know I sound like a broken record, but if you want it, they want it too. If it's interesting to you, it'll be interesting to them. And if you read it, and oh, here's the thing. When you go back and reread your novel for the first time, which is kind of magical, first draft, it's in the drawer, you have moved on with your life, you have, rediscovered having like real meals and being out in the sun. You come back and you read it, and if you can make it feel new to you, that's very, very, very useful. And then you hit the place where you're like, oh, that does stand out. You'll get a sense for it, because all writers are readers as well. If it stands out to you, it'll stand out to them. If it works for you, it'll work for them. And if there's a reason for it, if you can use it to, if they're adding, if the piece of exposition is adding something fun to the world, they'll forgive a lot for fun. And honestly, they'll forgive a lot for horror too. I have definitely found that. I'm like, really? You were okay with that? That's fine. And at some point, I'll convince my agent it's time to release that unpublished Singing Hills that involves eating babies, but not yet. It's fine.
Baby
Any day
steps.
now.
Baby
Any day
steps,
now.
me. Yeah.
They're very small steps, so yeah.
And I think that kind of fits into what you were talking about earlier in terms of plausibility. It's like plausibility doesn't necessarily mean like this is scientifically accurate or perfectly historically accurate. Accuracy and plausibility are very different things. And I think that is a good thing to apply when you're approaching, like, obviously, secondary world science fiction fantasy. It is very helpful to understand like what's plausible in the context of this thing I created. But then in like a historical fantasy like Siren Queen or The Chosen and the Beautiful, it's like real world settings with real world things and time period where there is um, a level of technology and a level of scientific progress or what have you that people can go back and research and be like, oh, you got this wrong and blah blah, blah. How does it differ for you when you're kind of approaching these details for a secondary world versus a real world setting?
It's essentially the same, because I don't think I don't really write anything that's terribly realistic, because I hate it when people check my math. It's like that I mean, that I love that. I think we learned that last week at the awkward book fair. It's like, never use numbers, and I'm like, no, I'm never going to use numbers, because then someone's going to add it up and realize I'm full of shit. But when it comes to really, it's what I keep saying when people ask me for writing advice and plausibility, and like, how do you get away with memory spirits? How do you get away with mammoths or deals with the devil? And I'm like, do you think our world makes sense? Do you think our world is in the least plausible? There is a tiny bird that it's a little vampire bird. It makes it. digs its little beak into cows and drinks blood, and that's how it lives. Does that make sense? No, no, it doesn't make sense. But this is the world we have to live in. Every day we bridge the impossible. We believe things that are hard. We believe in things that have no proof because we have to, because we're people, because we're here to be kind to each other, I hope. We're here to be okay, I hope. And we're okay, this is getting really metaphysical, but we're all going to die. Okay, we're sorry for any 9-year-olds in the audience, but we're all going to die, and every day we have to deal with that, but still get on with our lives and pay our bills and pet our cats and take care of our kids and all that fun stuff. That's what we're here to do, and that's impossible. And if we believe that we can do that, you can believe that I've put a dragon into downtown Milwaukee, or that sometimes when you die, you get so hungry you come back anyway. It's the world's impossible. So is our writing. So let's get on with it. How about that?
Love that.
That's awesome.
You can't, you know about mushrooms, man. The world's impossible. We're getting on with it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And even just in my backyard, like every day, we have these things called tarantula hawks, which in the Spanish name is way better. They're called caballo del diablo, which means like the devil's horse.
I love
Or it's kind of like alluding
that's
to like
so
the
metal.
4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
Mhm.
It's so fucking metal. And they like we have like fruit trees in our backyard, so they're happy eating like the nectar and all that kind of stuff. But then when they want to have little babies, they find a fucking tarantula and they sting it and paralyze it and bring it back to their little hole. And we have holes all over our backyard. And they just drag it in there and they like basically implant their babies inside. And then the baby, like the larvae, when they are born, eat the tarantula from inside out, and that's how they start their lives and get their like their nourishment from birth.
I wrote that as a
Life is fucking metal.
I wrote that as a short story romance, actually. That's
Oh
off
my
my
God.
website.
I love that.
It's a romance.
It's a romance.
It's a
Absolutely
romance.
a romance. It's always a romance.
Readers, just bear that in mind when you read the
Oh
end
my
of the
God.
City in Glass.
I love Nee's version of romance. It's wonderful. Oh my God.
Look, it's not pretty, but love isn't pretty. We all know that.
Yeah. Love is messy. It's like
Love's fucked up, man.
Yeah, like a tarantula and a tarantula hawk.
Well, this has been
Oh my
freaking
God.
great. Do you have any final advice you would like to give to any writers in the room, or anything we might have missed out on during the conversation that you really wanted to add?
How about if you believe it, we will. If you love it, we will. Just, give us a chance to do so.
That's a
Short
beautiful
and
note
sweet.
to end on. Yeah. Life is metal. Love is metal. Let's
Get on with it.
Let's just get on with it. Enjoy this fucking ride. All right. Well, that is it for this masterclass and our 2-parter with Nghi. Thank you so much for unpacking this with us. It has been a blast. Yeah, thank
This
you
is
very
great. This is
Thank
my first
you.
interview for this tour, so you're getting me very fresh,
Perfect.
right?
Oh yeah.
Yay.
Fresh and wild. This is
Yeah.
great. All right. Well, Nghi, where can folks find you online?
I'm at nghivo.com, which is my website, and I'm at Nghi Vo on Blue Sky as well.
Awesome. And you can go pick up Nghi's books. You got The Singing Hill Cycle if you want novellas. You got Siren Queen and The Chosen and the Beautiful if you want relatively short novels. And then you've got The City in Glass, which is an even shorter novel. And they're all fantastic. And go show this wonderful human being your support by going and buying a book. And you can also find SFF Addicts all over the place at SFF Addicts Pod. You can find me at Adrian M. Gibson. You can go, if you like mushrooms and the fucked up details and descriptions of mushrooms and decomposition and all that great stuff, go to Mushroom Blues in ebook, paperback, and hardcover. Greta, what about you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Greta K. Kelly. And if you are looking for a fantasy heist book with a mythology based on Ghostbusters, check out The Queen of Days.
You got it. We're all into weird shit if you didn't realize it this far into the show, or if you're a longtime listener, then you already know that already. Yeah, thank you all for listening. For now, keep reading, keep imagining, and we'll see you next time on SFF Addicts.